TV's hottest stage. With the freshest names in the game. Fresh music. With your hosts Linda Dane, Sammy Watala, and Daggy Nice. Catch NTV The Beat every weekday at 5 p.m. We are NTV The Beat, and we turn on your musical world.
In the world of music and entertainment, NTV got you covered.
That's why my baby said.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
All right, a very good morning once again, and many thanks for staying with us right here on the #1 breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV. It would be highly unscrupulous to move forward with this show minus shining a light on our sponsors who are making this show a very huge success. ITEL, go and clamor for their technological services. A happy new year to everyone working at ITEL. A happy new year to everyone working at the U-Lesson app. It is one app through which you could maximize on continued learning actually by using the internet. They have interactive and fun videos on that platform that your child could actually maximize on. Well, we also do know that Minute Maid is also another sponsor of ours. You can replenish all those fluids and energy by buying yourself a bottle of Minute Maid in that regard. Away from that, I do have Sarah Birete, the Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance, and also Jacob Eyeru is the chairperson of the National Youth Council. Now, we want to talk about the factors or the issues that will dominate 2022. What will they be? Will it be the UPDF and, invasion of Congo to take out the ADF in that regard? Will we be seeing more of the UPDF entering Congo, eastern parts, to ensure that we flush out the ADF? Will we be seeing a resurgence of COVID-19 owing to the Omicron variant? That's what we want to talk about. Or we'll be seeing another heated debate surrounding the Milo land. Yes, also another heated debate surrounding the bail issue. You understand that is also coming through. Attorney General Chidiowa Chiwanuka is working on those draft reforms to be tabled in front of Parliament so that we could actually have that conversation taking center stage. Also, by-elections are also coming through. Yes, what else should we look forward to? NRM squeeze on the opposition. Shall it continue just like we saw in 2021? The clampdown or the shrinking democratic space. Away from the shrinking democratic space, there is a shrinking civic space. People like Sarah Birete and the Center for Constitutional Governance and 54 other NGOs in August were actually shut down. So we will be seeing another shrinking episode of the civic space right here in Uganda, aside from the Uganda-Rwanda conflict and also what we are doing within the eastern parts of Congo. You know very well that Rwanda took over the supervisory role in the eastern parts of the DRC. They are now the police in the DRC in the east. But then there's a pushback from the residents of the citizens of Congo. They're saying, please, we do not want to see any presence of Rwanda within our country. So there have been protests within that country. And that's what we want to talk about and a lot more. A very good morning, Jacob Eyeru. Very good morning, Sarah Birete. Happy New Year, gentlemen and lady. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Indeed. And a happy New Year to viewers.
Indeed. Yeah. Let me start with you, actually, Sarah Birete. Dominant factors or issues in 2022. What do you want to start with? The shrinking civic space? In August of last year, 54 NGOs were shut down. Do you expect the same or heightened attention to increase in 2022?
Maybe for the benefit of the viewers, it's important for Ugandans to know that whereas the National NGO Bureau said that the 54 organizations had not complied with some of the legal requirements, since then, even when all documentation has been availed, all these organizations are still closed.
So it was intentional, it was political?
I think they know better what they are doing, but I know a number of these organizations, more than half, that have submitted the documents that were allegedly missing, and they are still closed. There are 3 court cases arising from that decision, which is draconian in our view. and we still see absence of NGO board. That means that the Bureau has no supervision and no capacity to perform its duties, and there is still absence of adjudication committee.
I see.
Yeah.
So you see the same exacerbating in 2022, owing to what kind of factors, Sarah?
I think there's an intention to close civic space. The World Freedom Index in November last year released their annual findings, and Uganda was scored the 151 position, having moved from 131 in 2019, 142 in 2020. We closed 2021 in 151 position, and we are classified as not free. On the front of political rights, we scored 11 out of 40, and on civil liberties, we scored 23 out of 60. So that's a total of 34% in terms of political and civil liberties on the global scale. So I think the results are out for everybody to see.
Are you just waiting for this to happen? Do you have a concrete plan as civil society to push back?
You see, the work of civil society is provided for in the Constitution. It's the work we do by virtue of being citizens. We can participate in our governance in our individual capacities, the way I am on this show. We can participate in our governance through civic or political organizations. So there are three options for all citizens to participate in their governance. Individually, civic or political organizations. So once you close the civic organizations, do you take away people's rights that they are born with by virtue of being citizens of this country?
I see.
You don't. You can only affect the way they participate.
Well, I also do know that other NGOs have continued to work irrespective of the fact that they were shut down by the NGO Bureau. You do have NGOs like the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. We're talking about Godber Tumushabe. He has continued to work, and he said, me, I do not care about the directive. I shall continue to operate. Don't you think they'll be, you know, getting on the other side of the law?
We have three categories of civic organizations in this country. We have associations, like students associations, farmers unions, SACCOs. We have companies registered under the URSB that are limited by guarantee and not necessarily under the Bureau. And that's where Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies and others belong. There are also organizations like mine that are registered under the Bureau. And the NGO Act is very clear. If you want to be called an NGO, a non-governmental organization, that's when you are required to go under the Bureau. But if I want to operate as a public company or a charity organization, and I don't wish to be called an NGO, I don't have to.
So they were shut down illegally?
The NGO the Bureau is overstepping its mandate, and largely because it has no supervision. It's just a secretariat. Sections 5, 6, and 7 of the NGO Act are very clear that all the work of the Bureau shall be determined and supervised by the board. The board does not exist, so what work are they doing?
Indeed. Jacob Ayeru, talk to us about this and a lot more. The shrinking civic space. Are you also not concerned about the shrinking civic space owing to the factors we saw in 2021?
Thank you. And Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year, Sarah.
Happy New Year.
I want to start here. It is impossible to close civic space in that sense. It is impossible if you do not close access to information.
But you can close access to fans, DGF.
Yes, and that's the point I'm going to make to you. If our people are allowed to continually access information, to continually access the events of the world, the knowledge in the world, it is impossible to keep their minds closed.
I see.
Civic space and civic action, in effect, is really the response of people, the citizens of any country, to the actions of those in power.
Right.
That is a civic space. Is that permissible? Is it present? I will tell you that as far back as slavery, the only way you can control people ultimately is ensuring that they do not learn, they do not have the free will to learn, they do not have access to learning tools. And that doesn't exist in Uganda. What we have in Uganda is a situation where there are concerns about political activities by certain actors, and the state takes action on those actors. But in effect, the openness of access to information means citizens can still be inspired into any kind of action by the learning that they achieve. And so in my own understanding, as long as people are able to access information, you can't effectively close civic space. And so in that end, therefore, Uganda has not attempted to close civic space. But I would agree.
To close NGOs,
I would agree.
And they've not given them due process to have their documentation rectified.
Yeah, let me make that point.
If it wasn't political,
let me
let
make
them
point.
rectify the documentation.
The point I am now making is I agree that there has been a shrinking in the activities within civic space.
I see.
But not for entirely no reason. The state has had reservations on some actions by non-governmental organizations. Many of them have had challenges with how they have operated. But there are also perhaps, and I'm not doing away with it, that there might be witch hunt in some instances owing to developed information for purposes of political contestation, because 2021 was an election year. I will throw, and I'm sure Sarah is aware of this, that there was a consortium of NGOs that had agreed together to be some sort of election watch body, and that was supposed to culminate into them being present in all polling stations, culminate in them being present at all voting centers, at all tally centers, district and national, so they can relate to the people what exactly is happening. And I think government did not take this in good faith, because then that sounds like serving the same purpose as the Electoral Commission, or becoming an engine for a political competitor that might not have, because those are very important aspects of managing to win an election. And so I think that in lieu of that reality, it was not in the political interest of the NRM actors to say that let's allow such a thing go on unscathed, unchecked. And I think that that's what culminated into 54 NGOs being halted.
No, I think you are misrepresenting many.
No. I am saying that culminated. I am not saying that it caused alone. I'm saying it culminated.
Yeah, but still you are misrepresenting issues.
But the other issue is on the issues of the Bureau. I don't really work with the Bureau. I think that the Bureau has had its stand, and I think that they've challenged it in the courts of law. And I'm looking at the development. For me, as a young person in Uganda, I would love that NGOs can be formed and operate freely, and I would love that we can see that their work is systematically advancing Uganda's development, but also is enlightening the people of Uganda and to fair and just causes for citizens.
Set the record straight. You said he was misrepresenting some facts as far as why these NGOs were shut down. What we did here was most of the leaders were being called terrorists.
But he was referring to the ban on NUU, the National Elections Watch Uganda. Civil society organizations have observed the elections since the enactment of the Constitution. That was an outfit for observing elections. Observing elections is not a competition with the mandate of Electoral Commission or political parties.
Unless you know you're going to do something wrong.
It is provided for nationally, African Charter on Elections, Democracy, the ACDEC, and international structures with even UN guidelines. So there was nothing out of the normal or saying you are duplicating other people's mandate or you're doing something suspicious. During the 2021 elections, it's not only local observers that were affected by the draconian measures of the NRM.
We didn't see
to retain the U.S. Embassy. They wanted people accredited, enough observer mission to cover the country. They accredited a third of their people, and they pulled out of the exercise. We know what happened with the EU. News were all over. So it wasn't just an act in isolation to refer to it, leading to the ban of leading to the ban of the 54 NGOs.
The shrinking civic space ability, is it an attempt to actually keep Ugandans in the dark?
If you look critically at the organizations that are targeted, it's organizations working on governance and accountability and highlighting issues where the ruling party is deteriorating. Highlighting issues of human rights, highlighting issues of corruption, highlighting issues of absence of service delivery. So maybe there's an intention to close the citizens out of this information that is making NRM unpopular.
I see. What do you make of that?
Well, I want to put it to you that I think that the biggest contributors to anti-government rhetoric in Uganda are not organizations, but funders of those organizations. If the government had the intention to close civic space, it would perhaps close that. Let me
He's
make
letting the cat out of the bag.
If I may submit, I think that government would be closing missions of the EU. It would be closing the US Embassy in Uganda. And I think it would be closing. But
they did close the biggest consortium of countries that were funding our NGOs. Over 9 countries with the DGF.
No. I want us to understand. DGF was not closed. DGF was suspended. The
president wants representation
were suspended.
on the board.
And
fair enough.
Fair enough, and there's been a lot of conversation in the background that will, I hope,
representation on the board and so forth.
No. I am one of those that really hopes that DGF opens and works. But what the point I'm making is that the misrepresentation now is that government, in acting on one source of financing for civic activities, is therefore closing civic activities. There are so many funders of civic activities in Uganda that have not seen the wrath of government, and some of them fund
organizations.
Yes, there's the Open Space, the Open Society Initiative for Eastern Africa, funds civic society. There is the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy. There are so many. There are so many. There is IRI here, International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute.
Are you aware of the new directive for them to hand over money to finance?
Yes, but that is not closure.
What is that?
No.
Don't you think it is another measure?
You are saying there is nothing happening with other funders.
I am saying.
Can you explain that directly?
Okay, this is what Sarah is talking about.
I'm going to explain.
Sarah is talking about the fact that the government, courtesy of the Ministry of Finance, said for an NGO, even the DGF, to give money to Romeo Busiku's NGO in Uganda, it would have to first go through the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance would send the money to Parliament. Parliament calls this NGO, which presents its proposal or list of activities they want to engage in 2022. Then Parliament appropriates a budget for this NGO for money they never made, money that is coming in from a funder abroad. Why would government go through all those hurdles if they do not really want to see a shrinking civic space?
No. So let me explain something.
Yes, Jacob.
You cannot run an economy where money comes in increasing measure and not within your control.
I see.
That kind of money flow is bordering illicit. It does not help. It does not help the intention of you actually achieving money put in the productive areas of your economy. If government is going to ensure that there is productivity in terms of developmental issues of financing for our country, then they need to know where money is going when it's coming in. What I may not agree with at a personal level is that the money that comes in for CCG has to go through all the processes and approval of government for you to be able to receive that money.
Indeed.
What is actually happening is that government, and I agree with it, needs to play a part in that process of money flow. Can we see that this is the money coming in? Can we see what it is exactly going to do? Is very important for us.
Sarah Birete, government is putting this plan to ensure that this money goes to good
problem
use.
And
yes, explain to us.
My mentee, Jacob Ayel, is really contradicting himself.
I see.
But I understand that defending some of the things does not come easily. They say that there is a problem, government must monitor funds.
They feel like this money is financing
Yes,
terrorists.
this money can't come in the account and you don't know what it's doing. We have financial institutions. We have the Anti-Money Laundering Act. We have all the banking instruments.
I see.
You cannot receive money in this country, and it is not monitored and cleared by government institutions.
Someone was arrested 2 months ago for having received some $100,000 US, and this is just a normal, ordinary citizen.
Yes, but so government monitors. Government monitors financial frauds in this country. Development partners have operated in this country long, even before independence and after independence. For somebody to say there is a problem and government needs to take this draconian measure of saying, but these donors also fund individuals. Say that Romeo Busiko is going to receive 5,000 shillings to do some work in his village, and I must sit and monitor and approve, and really that is a sign of idleness.
And they also have the power to say, we do not want to see this project being expedited.
No,
Yes.
what
No,
what
you
is
have
wrong?
your time.
What is wrong
Let
with the
her finish.
idea? I think that's the
Let
point
her
I want to
finish.
hear.
Yes, Sarah.
That is a sign of idleness. If you say, okay, Busiko, whether there are very few funders with the shrinking civic space that has gone on for long, other than DGF, even the so-called multi-party institute for whatever that funds iPod, go
The
through
Netherlands
DGF.
Institute.
Yes. So other than DGF and the missions, which of course Jacob was saying they can close US embassy, I wish I could see really that happening. That say US embassy leave Ugandan soil, EU leave Ugandan soil, and these diplomatic partnerships are very clear. The diplomatic partnership, the Geneva Convention on the governing diplomatic relations, the missions work with government as well as the people, state and non-state actors. So you cannot say, I'm going to stop EU from working with citizens. No. Then if you have enough stamina and you've reached that draconian level, hit sea level bottom, expel them. That's fine, and we have seen countries that have tried that, and we know where they've been. But the diplomatic relationships are not limited to state actors. It's state and non-state actors, and those protocols are very clear. So if you want to divert from them or pull out of some of the provisions of these protocols, then do it.
All right, let's put this conversation to a halt as far as the shrinking civic space is concerned. But DGF has a financial war chest of over 500 billion Uganda shillings. And President Museveni was saying, well, he was adamant to let this go ahead without representation from his government in that regard. So they are still in conversations or discussions to see to it that the shackles on DGF are removed, but we are still grappling with the shrinking civic space. Away from that, in 2021, we also did notice a shrinking democratic space. 2021 was the election year, January 14th. We did see those elections take center stage. You did see the violence, that transpired even before in 2020 November when Robert Chagulanyi was making his way to Luka. You remember the protests? 54 people were killed. So elections always degenerate into violence. We saw that also in Kayunga. An LC5 by-election. You did have a candidate being battered in the process and so forth. You did have supporters of one candidate being showered with tear gas. You did have a principal of a political party, the National Unity Platform Party, that is Robert Chagulanyi, being stopped from entering the jurisdiction of Kayunga simply because President Museveni was also within the area. The shrinking democratic space. Let's talk about that and a lot more. Osara Birete, do you expect it to get worse in 2022 because we have other by-elections that are going to be taking center stage? The Mitiana by-election. That is the biggest
in Buganda, by-elections will be violent for two reasons. In the outgoing elections, Buganda region largely rejected NRM with the defeats at several levels, including cabinet ministers and vice president. And they largely voted for the leading opposition party.
I did hear the president on Saturday saying Buganda region is for the NRM, trying to justify the win in Kayunga.
I wouldn't mind a party genuinely winning support in a region. But what I find problematic as a person who sits at the Center for Constitutional Governance,
Yes, sir.
working to advance constitutional democracy, what I find problematic is the vulgarization of people's right to choose leaders. The level of violence, the level of absence or abdication of duty by Electoral Commission, the impunity that goes on. Just the 3 days to Kayunga elections. Kayunga was a reminder of Ugandans on what transpired in the January 14th general elections.
So there were similarities.
3 days to elections. You have Honorable Chagulanyi sieged at his home. I don't know what crime he was suspected of going to commit.
They were saying that he was going to put the security of the president at risk when he goes into a same jurisdiction as the, the fountain of order, President Jeremy Museveni.
And under what law is that written? Because we are a country that works on coded laws.
I see.
So if somebody has committed a crime or is suspected of committing a crime, that crime must be mentioned, which law it is founded, and what are the ingredients of that crime. So I would like to hear that coming out. I don't know any law that says leaders of two political parties cannot be in any district. I don't know it. I wish I could hear of it on this show. 2, you curtail somebody's rights, his family, his people that were arrested. Under what law are you operating? Are we a country governed by laws, or we are a country of might that must put guns on everybody's head, tear gas and bulldoze their way and get whatever they want?
And all this was happening under the watchful eye of the Inter-Party Organization for Dialogue. Go ahead.
Then you saw Electoral Commission in Kayunga. All the leadership of Electoral Commission was in Kayunga. The chairman, the secretary, and of course the most important person of the day, the returning officer.
I see.
The events that happened, people woke up to fully staffed ballot boxes. I saw one on NTV at 6:30. Fully voted. Electoral officials said, yes, these are an order from above, quoting the NTV source. And then you saw a chairman present in Kayunga who had no capacity to even say, I have heard of this problem, please stop this exercise, put aside that box, get new materials, let voters start voting. Nothing. Opening hours for opening polls, procedures for opening polls, all abused. Every place had a predict list. We saw in media before 7, the time for opening polls. Predict, and officials are there. Nothing. Electoral Commission kept quiet, the officials that were in Kayunga, until the day. Of course, they almost failed to announce. Whatever they announced, I'm glad it has gone to court, and maybe the truth will come out. The agents that were arrested, some people picked in their guest rooms, MPs, and at 6, under the pretext of curfew. So all that vulgarization of people's democracy. And I want to interest Ugandans in using the Human Rights Enforcement Act in pushing electoral officials to account for abuse of citizens' rights to choose their leaders. Under the Human Rights Enforcement Act, Articles 20 and 45 of the Constitution protect other rights, including political rights to choose leaders. And any person who violates them should be taken on in courts of law in their individual capacities.
Sarah, even the journalists were never spared. You remember that?
Yes,
when we were going
I think about 5 journalists were detained. Yeah, so that's the nature of the vulgarization of democracy in this country.
I see. Do you expect this to get worse in 2022?
In Buganda, all by election. Yes, because of the contestation. NRM was denied. It must win some votes on gunpoint.
You think even the one in Mityana, Nabakoba and Joyce Bagala, it's going to the NRM?
My prediction is that all by-elections in Buganda are going to be extremely violent.
I see. Jacob Eyero, do you anticipate the same violence to also take center stage as witnessed in the previous year, and even before that, and before that, and before that, Jacob?
Thank you. First of all, there should not be violence in elections.
Indeed.
And security forces should be the anchors of that guarantee that there is no violence in elections. But there will be violence in every election if we allow the president to appear at the same time with the leader of opposition in the same place. It will not there will not be need to orchestrate that violence. The people will orchestrate that violence, because politics by nature is a campaign or an activity of great emotive nature. A lot of emotion is invested in support, and when people feel the blunt disgust for loss, they will not be waiting for what Bobi Wine says or what the president says. They will say, that's NRM, I am Noop, we might have a problem in this time. Those times are charged. And if we want to avoid what happened in Kenya in 2007, we need to be careful about what goes on ground. And I think that it is a bit defeatist for me. Opposition needs to be honest. The elections in Uganda are not only in Kayunga, for starters. We did not have only Kayunga having by-elections. But fair enough, let's discuss Kayunga because it is of interest. One of the things that happened the day before the president arrived was that there was a massive opposition rally. Honorable Zake was there. My brother, David Lewis, the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform was there. The leader of opposition with his convoy was there. And the entirety of the opposition, Honorable Betty Namboze had been there for about a week or so, just canvassing support. And there were no incidents. So why is it that on the one day, and the campaign was not for that one day, on the one day the president is going to show up there, that's when the leader of opposition also wants to show up there. This is because the voters are not running away from Kayunga. They're going to be there.
It is usually the last day of campaigning to show the might of the other political party. That's when Noop would come out strong to show, oh, we are having this by-election in our hands.
But those are semantics. No,
to show
Romeo, those are semantics.
The support that they are
Can
having.
you have the president going, not on the final day?
Those are semantics.
Jacob, we're also hearing that the fact that the reason why security stops this from happening is not to show the real might of the opposition a day before the elections are held, simply because the rigging has already begun. The first mode of rigging is to show that your opponent is not as popular or strong as people deem them to be. So security will come, disperse all the supporters, and then let the NRM show its might, so that when the outcome shows that NRM has won, no one is going to put up a contestation.
No,
because we saw the huge crowds of the NRM.
That's not true.
Of the opposition not being allowed to do the same.
No, that's not true. On many occasions, the final rallies of the leading contesting parties in the national elections were all in Kampala. The final ones, one in Kololo, the other usually somewhere else, but I know that the NRM is usually in Kololo. So it's not true that there is an attempt to avoid that competition.
Okay, but is it possible for NRM to go early so that you avoid the final day?
It is possible, but I'm not the Electoral Commission. They can schedule that. What I want to say is that I do not think that when Bobi Wine appears or when the president appears is what determines how people are going to vote. It is the message that they carry. Bobi Wine had the chance to appear on that day. Why did, if NRM in fact did not intend for that to happen,
Jacob,
why did they block that?
Robin Anabanja, in the same by-election, during the campaigning, she was bribing individuals in Kayunga.
Yeah,
4,000
there was that video.
Thank you.
Since we are not focusing only on Kayunga, even in the campaigning period, we saw NRM stalwarts giving out money to citizens within this country to vote for the NRM party candidates. And then their reasoning was that the one with the financial muscle actually wins. The normalization of the same.
First of all, this is an offense. Bribery in an election is an offense, which is triable in the courts of law. And there's much more evidence that Sarah was alleging to from Kayunga that was showcased on TV. For me, I think that we have a court system here that has had cases, and the opposition has won those cases. And I think that we should not lose faith in what has proven to be working for opposition, that when they go to court and there is evidence, elections get overturned. But I also want to say that this idea that Buganda rejected NRM is not true.
How did it perform?
No, NRM did not perform as it would have wanted, but you cannot say, therefore, that Teso rejected Noop, that actually rejected NUP. That language of rejection is not politically correct. The language is that the people did not choose you at that time in the majority. But there are areas in Buganda where the NRM was unopposed for member of parliament. And I can tell you that Honorable Javira from NRM was unopposed just next door to Masaka in Rakai. Why? Because those people thought there is no need for contestation. Does it mean that NUP did not have people knowledgeable about its existence there?
The normalization
it's really not
of
true.
money in politics. That's what we want
One
to talk about.
seat out
Jacob,
of
here.
what?
Thank you.
The normalization of the same.
All
Why?
right. I think that we have an ongoing challenge and that we need a national consensus on the usage of money and the employment of money in our electoral processes.
How
I
much
think,
should one use, indeed?
I think that if we can't legislate the matter, then we need to be honest about how we deal with the matter, because a time might come in this country that the poor will not be able to run for elective office.
Will not, or are not at the
No,
moment?
will not.
They
I
are
think
not even at the moment
no.
able to join elective politics in this country because of the money that is too much.
No. Most of the NUP MPs used south of 10 million, and I think that's a fair amount. After nomination, some of them just went home. Some were announced, and they were not sure that they had won in an electoral process that's unfair. With no agents, with nothing,
Half of the
they were
candidates
announced.
did not have money.
Exactly,
But
but
the government ransacked their offices and took all their money.
no, but the NUP itself paid for nomination fees for the candidates that did not have money. I think that politics
I remember
is a
that.
question
But it was
of
hard for-
organization. And organization involves mobilization of resources. There is never a candidate around the world who has enough money for their political campaign.
Except President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Sarah Birete, the over-commercialization of politics in this country, the normalization of the same. The fact that when you talk to people like Emmanuel Dombo, you know, at the Secretariat, he will tell you, Romeo, money in politics is actually very, very normal. If I have my money and I'm willing to convince person X to vote for me because of my financial muscle, it is totally okay. Let's talk about the normalization.
Is it
of
convincing
this money.
with the money or bribing with the
calls
money?
it a convincing.
I know that as a, you know, as a NRM over the 35 years, now 36, there will be 36 years on 26th
Indeed.
January. They are heavily relying on two issues to retain themselves in power, and that's man and violence. So if you take away any of the two elements, NRM will lose power. That's the power now. That's their authority to continue to dominate politics, man and violence.
I see.
Yeah.
So we should expect the same in 2022.
They can't change until they are out of the system. That's now NRM.
No.
They can't do without money and violence.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Just take the trend from, you can start from 2021, but we could have started from the first election after the enactment of the Constitution.
Which is
1996.
The stoning of
Largely
Semagere supporters.
peaceful, yes. Semagere was stoned in some parts, but largely you can say it was 80% peaceful. I know there was violence in some areas. If you go to 2001, very violent, including killings in Mukono Mengo by the army of Besigye supporters, shootings, open shootings on Besigye's rallies and Rukunjiri.
2006.
2006.
Is nominated in jail.
Yes, nominated in jail. Many things happened,
He had a week
including
of campaigning,
a
had to be
coffin that was intercepted with ballots going to the north.
I see.
Violence kept increasing. 2011, even the aftermath of the elections, 2016, 2021 was the climax that even attracted international sanctions.
54 killings.
Official, of course, there are more. Nobody has been, no single person has been held accountable for the 54.
Except,
No, I think that's not true.
except the Lance Corporal and the LDU gentlemen who are actually incarcerated. There were two gentlemen.
Last week after the sanctions, the Magnitsky sanctions,
Yeah.
I saw that stage managed act. For the record, what I
After
found
Bill
very,
Candido,
yes,
yeah,
after the Kando
2 days
sanctions,
later.
there was a stage managed act. What was extremely shocking, because there was a claim that the state did not know what was happening. The BBC documentary, The Eye, brought out issues on 3 killings, 3 killings in Kampala. At first, you know, the title was problematic to say, with all the people who died, how do you say 3 killings? Of course, that's before I saw what they had
Alright, the whole article.
put together. So they pinned down people with the vehicle number plates, with the people you see in
Shooting
uniform.
indiscriminately.
Yes. And what did the state do?
Come for
They
us.
arrested journalists
Nation
for,
media.
for an international documentary.
Indeed.
What kind of impunity is that? I mean, what more evidence do you need?
The messenger was also in shackles, Jacob Eyero.
No, I don't support any act that closes our journalism. I don't support that, and I don't think that any right-thinking Ugandans should support that. But I want to say something, and for me, we need to be a bit honest.
Yes, Jacob.
The case of incarceration of the people that were held responsible for some of the killings, not all, but some of the killings in the November riots.
Indeed.
It was not a case of government going out to kill people because government is interested in moving around killing people. It was a case of government and actors, particular individuals in government, mishandling an operation on ground. In fact, the president has been the biggest proponent of those that want to have even the case of stray bullets, because there are so many stray bullets that kill people in Uganda, and he has said that there is necessity to actually investigate where the stray bullets are coming from, because they are aiming at something, and we have a conversation about that. I do not think there will be a morning where I will support any beating of journalists. I think that it is a gross misrepresentation of the intentions of our constitution.
But the man who ordered all that, Napoleon, Captain Nahamiya, is still out there, scot-free. They only scapegoated 6 of his, juniors. They did get some 6 months.
Yeah.
So I think, Romeo, I think we are going to have to agree that the operating environment of the state cannot be that they are piecing out information and evidence against themselves. I think that if there are excesses within the state, the question is whether there is legislation that permits for punitive action within our judicial system, and I think those exist. To the extent that individual officers can be held accountable, our country has made progress in trying to hold individual overzealous acts within representations of the state, and I think that's a good thing.
Punishing its own officers.
And I do not think that the state is not punishing those people. I think that the state has, for the quotations of the incarcerations.
Was the command of journalists beating punished?
But
He's
the
on
juniors
video, he's
who
everywhere.
actually orchestrated the act suffered the brunt of that.
See, I
And we
think
know members of security do not just act. There has to be an order.
I agree. You see, I agree with the necessity to punish those that do wrong in our society. But I think that the initiation, and for me, this is a question of responsibility. There is a journalism association in the country that can put up a show in the courts of law for these individuals that they say we have evidence of. This evidence is adducible in the courts of law. It should not be a question of argument on political talk shows.
Is it an affordable act for them?
Actually, government decided
Yes, it is. It is an
They have
affordable
money
act.
for lawyers.
There are pro bono lawyers all over town.
Give them some.
We did go to court, but then the
Yes.
fact is that government asked us to mediate out of court. So there is that mediation process.
So why did you
at the
accept
stage.
mediation out of court?
Well,
That then is the
It's a
question.
procedure.
It is a procedure.
No,
in civil cases.
it can
But
be
away from that,
declined.
Jacob,
Mediation
No,
can
it
be.
cannot.
No, arbitration is not forced upon the parties.
God.
Jacob Eyero, the president also promised compensation for the families that were lost as a result of the stray bullets in the November protest. Up to now, not a single family has even been given any money. But then guess what? Massacre here happened recently. But then we did see the president rush over there to give 10 million to each of the families that lost a family member. Was there political will to address the concerns of the supporters of the National Unity Platform Party over their relatives who were lost in 2020?
I think that we need to talk about Ugandans in cases of losses. I don't think we should attach it to political affiliation. And I think that the show of commitment was in saying that those that were killed by stray bullets were going to be compensated.
Who are like 33.
Yes, but I also think that government made a stance on the same, saying that they'll need to first investigate and then come up to, you know, a conclusive report on who actually is deserving of this and who is not.
A CID report came out and indicated 33 were innocent, 11 were the only rioters. A police report also came out saying the 33 were the rioters and 11 were the innocent ones. So there were conflicting reports coming in from the same government.
No, what I'm saying is that if there is commitment to compensate people, then there's a show of will
but
to compensate.
There is no commitment, Jacoberu, simply given the fact that this happened in November of 2020.
Yes.
You have massacre that happened just recently, but they did get their compensation. So what about those who are actually grieving for their loved ones in 2020?
No, first of all, it's like the pensions system. We don't all get pension at the same time.
But who is prioritized?
Exactly. And the question of priority depends on who is actually giving the money. If I came to give money to the poor are all over Africa, they are all over the world. But why do I choose Uganda ahead of Kenya should not be a question of whether I am willing to give or not. At least the show of goodwill is in giving someone. And I think that that's what government has done.
I see.
But I also think that this is an unnecessary debate because there has already been a commitment to compensate them. And so at whichever time there is going to be, that conversation can always come up, like you've just brought it right now.
What do you make of this delayed compensation of the victims that lost their lives in 2020?
You know, my first point of emphasis is that the people discharged with the mandate to protect lives in this country should protect all lives, including lives of those that don't support the regime.
I see.
So we should not promote a policy of kill and pay. Let's kill you and pay in this country. That's first priority. Let's protect people's lives and property. And that's what the Constitution requires. In case of death, that we should minimize. Then there should be clear procedures for speedy compensation. But we should not promote a policy of say, people have died, I will pay. Life is, priceless. We should not shoot and pay, no. Let's save lives.
And I think that's why the security goes onto the streets in the case of riotous behavior to save lives. And that's why there needs to be a review in the instance of loss of lives. And I think that's a fair statement.
The issue of the bail law reforms, you do have the Attorney General who is saying he will be tabling these reforms for discussions to start taking center stage. Bail law reforms, what do you make of this, Sarah Birete? Is it another avenue through which government intends to clamp down on the opposition?
Well, I know that there could be or there could not be bail reforms. Because if you look at, we have sufficient bail laws in this country with the authority of courts to grant bail at their discretion. Courts have their own guidelines, and everybody who qualifies, at least on the judgment of the presiding judicial officer, they are always granted bail. I know that there was controversy, and there is always controversy on the bail debate whenever people on the opposition side are arrested. It started way long, and it has been. And so now that there is some quietness on the two NUP MPs, so the debate has died down because there is no interest of victims at close range. Because anybody is a candidate for bail. We have seen precedents in this country with the ministers who drafted draconian laws of detention without trial and that kind of thing and fell first victims. Yes, we have seen also the Interception of Communications Act, Computer Misuse Act, and people who fell first victims.
Indeed.
I can assure anybody who is clamoring for these bail reforms that they will fall first victims.
What do you make of this, Jacob?
Firstly,
a witch hunt.
No.
Go ahead.
That's interesting. But firstly, I like the debate on bail. One of the things that it's highlighting, which is a very big necessity in this country, is effectiveness of the judicial service system.
I see.
If our judicial service operations in the country cannot tie down cases within 6 months to 1 year, I think that that is not a
Do
good.
you think this
that's
is
not a
another
good
case
procedure.
of the executive interfering with the judiciary?
No.
Because when
It
you
is
talk
not.
to the judicial officers, they're like, for us, the law as it is sufficient. But then the president says, no way. So isn't this a case of the executive, just showing too much power and influence against the
First of
judiciary?
all, the
other wing of the government,
the executive can't get it through alone. The executive has to go through the legislature.
Indeed.
And if anyone is going to know about the adverse effects of trumped-up charges, it's going to be political actors in the legislature. I think that for me, the conversation, which it was the point I was making, was that there needs to be an alteration in the way our judicial services are executed for the expediting of cases. But I also think that the president is making a good point, and that point should not get lost in the interest of portraying this as a witch hunt.
That is Jacob Pierre. He is the chairperson of the National Youth Council. I'm afraid we are running out of time. We do have the UPDF entering Congo to flush out the ADF, and Omicron is also, or may block the reopening in that regard. What do you make of our operations within the eastern parts of the DRC? Might that actually bring about clashes between Uganda and Rwanda? Remember, Rwanda is already taking over the supervisory role as a police in the eastern parts of the DRC. The people are striking over their presence. What do you make of that?
Well, DRC is an interesting area for the neighbors. And it's good maybe the country will soon be part of the East African community. But I don't know whether that makes a big difference. They endorsed the final stages. It's not yet official, it is almost. Yeah, so the summit endorsed the final stages, So I don't know whether it will make a difference, given that we have been part of DRC through COMESA and other entities, but we wait to see. So you have a large, vast territory with a large absence of government. The International Crisis Group has put a total of armed groups and militias in DRC to date to 113, with some of them as, Congolese who just want to exploit minerals, and including ADF and other groups that X-FAR and Terham and others that are extremely dangerous and can destabilize the neighborhood. So the reasons for being in DRC by the neighbors, yes, are founded. Some of the procedures have been flouted. My only hope as a citizen is that we remain focused on the mission that we are telling citizens is what we are going to do in DRC.
And of course you are making gains. All right, 34 rebels were captured already.
Yes.
And Kamba Yayua was also captured.
And as I conclude, I know we are running out of time. It's important for the citizens to keep the timelines for Uganda presence in DRC. First time 1965, gold scandal under under Meto Nobote and Idi Amin, and we know what it caused and led to for us nationally. Then in 1998 to 2003, the Kisangani clashes that ended up in the International Court of Justice. We are in the era of digital information. We have everybody's alive on war crimes and crimes against humanity. So I hope that this time there will be no scandal.
Jacob, in a minute, we've run out of time.
We should keep in DRC until Eastern DRC actually has total peace. I do not understand how in Africa we can have a situation where one country's population cannot have the chance to be globally competitive, and then just next door we are fine with the idea. That should be a wrong
Jacob Eyeru, Chairperson, National Youth Council. Sara Birete, she is the Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. Many thanks, gentlemen and lady, for making the time to speak to us on this very, very first day of the show in the year 2022. Indeed. Pleasure.
Thank you.
And indeed, you're still watching NT Morning at NTV this beautiful Monday morning. Let's take a breather, but we return shortly. Don't go too far.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Did you know that Building Industry Management System, BIMS, will enable a developer to apply for building and occupation permits, commit the services of registered